Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Adil Siddiqui from Forex Magnets. Glad that you're joining us here for the last panel of the session. This is a mix of kind of where to get regulated as a brokerage firm, and then we're going to touch on some key regulatory aspects. We've got a selection of guests here. A couple of them are kind of a product focused from the binaries, CFD, FX side. A couple of them are from the technology side, and then we've got two specialist consultants who you can address key areas to. We're going to start with some introductions. So we'll begin on my right with Mr. Graham, who will give a brief 1 minute about himself, and then we'll carry on.
Hi everyone, my name's Graham Watkins. I work for a company called 10 Financial. We specialize in MT4 bridging technology. So while I'm not on the regulatory side, I'm on the technology side. We have a huge array of clients from around the world, and thus we have a privileged insight in where they're coming from and how they're structuring our businesses that I hope I can share with you.
Hi everyone, my name is Paul Derham. I'm one of the partners of a law firm based in Australia, and we act for a large part of the Forex and the Forex market and other financial service providers in Australia. And so we train the government regulator, we train banks, managed funds, Forex industry, and so sort of a broad financial services compliance firm. So we try and keep our clients out of court. That's what we tell our clients, and so we have the trainee aspect, and we have a team of people that get licenses, and so I guess a lot of people want to get into Australia for different reasons, and so that's I guess the angle that I'll come from this afternoon. So thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Shoam Cohen. I'm with TraderLogic. We are one of the first binary options technology providers, starting in around 2008. I will try to do my best to share with you our knowledge and experience from the regulatory perspective. As binary options are evolving more and creating more buzz in the markets, and more regulators are looking at us and looking to regulate and tighten up a little bit. So I hope we'll have a good session.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Mark Aspinall. I'm the Global Head of Sales for ADS Securities. Based out of Abu Dhabi, we offer FX CFDs to institutional individual clients. We also have offices in Hong Kong and Singapore. So yeah, looking forward to having a good discussion on regulations this afternoon.
Hello everybody, my name is Lior Shmueli. I'm the CEO of Archer Consultants. Archer Consultants is a firm that offers services for Forex companies and binary options companies. We offer services in company formations, banking, payment services, as well as regulation registration throughout the world. I'd say our flagship is New Zealand FSP, where we have our New Zealand office servicing approximately 30 different brokers at the moment. We also have API FX, which is a full technology solution for Forex startups. And looking forward to discussions about regulation and hopefully give you some insight into what we've been doing.
Perfect. Lior, we're going to start off with you just to bring some context to the panel. So when you've got an introducing broker, white label partner, or just somebody who wants to diversify into FX or derivatives, what kind of things are they looking at when they're looking where to get established?
The very first thing that I would ask when somebody wants to get established is, who are they, what are they doing, how big they are, and how they want to start up. Because it's very much a pocket-based start. Because you can have somebody sitting across the road from you that happens to be an affiliate or an IB, and he's very small. He's not real sure of himself how he's going to start up, and he might need to actually prove that he actually has a business before he actually steps and goes into the deep end. There's basically, as far as I always see, there's three steps. The first step is the unregulated body. The next one I would call it light regulated, and then I would say heavy regulated or regulated body. The three main aspects of those, the differences is obviously cost. There's a very big barrier between the first, second, and third. We can support all three, and we will try to tailor the solution to the client. So if the client is really just starting up, it may be the best thing for him is just to start up as an unregulated body, just getting these banks, getting these payment service providers, and just start working. Once you've proved that you actually have a business, that you can support the business, then you can move up. Some others already want to take the next step up. They want to go for the light regulated institutions, and that enables them to have better banking, cheaper services as far as payments, more variety, also a better reputation, but then they're more regulated. So they already have to open up their books. They already have to discuss with the regulators about what they can and can't do. KYC issues come in, AML issues come in, world checks come in. It's more bureaucratic. It's harder to accept clients, but your reputation is better. Once again, you can do the next step, more regulated, more costly, segregation of accounts, higher capital requirements. Everything gets a lot tougher. But
That's a long list, isn't it?
Sorry?
That's a long list.
It is. It's basically trying to find looking the individual and saying, where do you belong now? Because where he belongs now is not necessarily where he's going to belong 6 months from now or a year from now.
Sure. Graham, where are you seeing a lot of kind of on the offshore side, people setting up? Like which jurisdictions in particular?
So I would say that there's one unregulated, which is the BVI, and there's two light regulations, one that's getting, well, both are getting tougher in New Zealand and Cyprus. I think probably everyone in this room already knows that. It's always interesting to see what some of the other options are. You have the Seychelles, the Cayman Islands, Mauritius is popular now, and it's really a case of, I would say, people make a decision between, do they want to try and do something that's very different, very separate, and is probably easier in the sense that it's not under a microscope, or there's basically the more logical choice where you follow the crowd. You go to a New Zealand, you go to a BVI, and then you don't have the stigma of someone analyzing what you're doing. They just stereotype you, which sometimes can be good because it gives you the impression of doing the right thing, following others, but it can also be bad if you do have a wobble like Cyprus had, that you then get tarred with that brush.
Mark, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand, we all agree, I think there's three categories of broker: the unregulated, the light regulation, the heavy, the FCA, the NFA, etc. type broker. I think it's important to understand more about those level 3 brokers and what drives them to become effectively move to the level of the light regulation environment. Typically, level 3 brokers, who are they? They're guys that have worked in the industry, guys that have often worked for much larger much larger competitors, much larger brokers, who have a group of clients typically. They will bring with them a group of clients. They can get off-the-shelf technology, Graham, etc., MT4, all of that's available at a relatively sensible cost. So then they start, the proof of concept. They're starting very low-level marketing, typically word of mouth. But ultimately, the fact that you have no regulation, there's obviously limitations in how you can market and develop your business, but most importantly, I feel that it's ultimately the credibility and the client drive that will ultimately deliver you and also target you onto the next level. Because I feel there's only so far you can go in an unregulated environment. There's only so big you can go, so big that you can become before ultimately clients start asking, who are you? If you're telling me you're the X, Y, and Z, then why are you not regulated like all the other brokers that are in this particular field?
Shoham, what are you seeing on the binary side?
Well, with us, it's a bit different because we are falling under two categories. On the one hand, we are a bit of a different animal. We're seen as a more gaming or online casino, type of services. On the other hand, we are being fit very well into the financial definition. Going back 3 years ago, European Commission have acknowledged us as a derivative, so they define us as a financial instrument. So it really depends what is your business. As Shlomi was saying, you need to really understand who are your client audience, and based on that, you have to fit yourself into the right jurisdiction in terms of the regulations. We've seen a lot of movement and action on the regulatory side of things in the past 5 years. I would say 7 years, nobody really acknowledged us and nobody really cared about our existence, with the exception maybe of the Gambling Commission in the UK. Later on, 2008, the SEC have been looking a little bit more about binary options and trying to look into the regulations. But seriously, nobody took us to that extent. We're seeing now Cyprus pushing Malta. We saw JFSA in Japan taking us a little bit into an extreme extent and to some extent as well limiting us. In terms of operating, you can start offshore, you can start unregulated or lightly regulated, slowly move up according to your needs and the requirements by how credible you would like to be seen. So this is what
We mentioned offshore. It's a bit of a taboo. Graham and Mark will probably agree with me. In the London market, you don't mention offshore to your compliance officer. Paul, if you do get set up in somewhere like BVI Seychelles, what implications does that have when you think you're a tier 2 now and you want to get regulated in London or Australia or one of these developed countries?
Look, I guess we get inquiries from all 3 tiers of business, and if we get inquiry from someone who's been running a really successful business in BVI, they've been breaking down walls and just getting heaps of clients, they've been doing really well. It has zero impact on how easy it is for them to get a license in Australia, because the Australian regulator won't recognise those areas as being of regulated experience, which is one of the prerequisites for getting a license in Australia. You need 2 people minimum that have regulated experience in each of the areas you want to get into. And so someone like that from BVI, they would have to basically bring in either we can help them find a consultant or an employee, or they can bring in people through their own networks, and they'll just have to fork up the market rate for people, and hopefully they'll find someone that really helps them grow their business. So there's no advantage of them starting out somewhere like that if they do ultimately want to get into Australia. The risk that they have is also if they're doing well and they're saying targeting Google AdWords campaign at Australia, then they've just stepped over that line into being caught by Australian law, and because they're trying to induce people within the Australian jurisdiction to and provide a financial service to them. So if they get in trouble for doing that, then it'll be extremely difficult for them to get a licence eventually in Australia. They won't be able to put themselves forward as the responsible managers if that's happened. So that's the risk.
All right, perfect. A couple of questions that we've prepared for you. Does one territory have advantages over others? I mean, it's clear that you've got very advanced areas and less, but from a kind of business perspective, what are you seeing, Mark, from kind of where you guys are currently being in the Middle East?
I think regarding regulation in territories, does one territory have advantage over the other? Well, it depends what you want to achieve in your business and the clients that you want to target. For me, it's probably not a well-renowned phrase, but there's almost regulatory tourism. So, for example, New Zealand, or the majority of the brokers who set up in New Zealand are not looking to target the local market. They're looking to get the credibility from a sensibly regulated region and use that, as we talked about earlier, in defining their business and saying, actually, we're prepared to commit and compete on the bigger league. So, for example, that's good for someone that is looking for the credibility. But then, ultimately, the highest regard regulators, such as the FCA, well, actually, that's great, but again, only if you want for the European market only. So we really have to look at what do I want to achieve in my business, and where do I actually want to target my market. FCA is obviously very well respected, but it is not a global regulation. There is no form of global regulation, and therefore you need to strategically pick which markets and which regulations do I need in order to be able to access those markets.
Graham, yeah.
The one thing I'd say is regulation is quite fluid. As we said, a firm will start off with no or light regulation, and then as they grow, as they want to target the Australian market, they might change into high regulation. Whether a firm is in the BVI or in Australia or the UK doesn't change their business practices. It changes who they can target their business at. So I've got brokers that use our service in the BVI that are more professional in terms of how they do KYC than a broker in the UK. And the recommendation I'd give is, as long as you run a good business, then there's opportunity for change. Whether you want to upgrade, downsize, relocate for tax reasons, regulation reasons, you can. Regulation is more a concept that you have to exist by. as in a rule that you have to stick. And you can quickly find out that if you don't operate your business in the right way, even if you're in a jurisdiction that doesn't require it, when you then try and move into a jurisdiction, if you've been targeting the wrong people at the wrong time, you can't. So you can be fluid there. You don't have to stick to one regulation or the other. You don't have to say that one regulation will change your business. You can run a good business wherever you are and then make the choice of regulation based on a specific target at a specific time.
I would say, though, actually, that where you are regulated does drive business practice. Business operating in Japan, particularly with KYC, technical reporting requirements, has a fundamental difference from a business operating out of Cyprus. So regulation does influence how you run your business, and of course it should do. And therefore, that is a consideration that also needs to be put in place. I highlight Japan, which is very onerous in terms of their technical reporting, regulatory reporting, the responsible individuals, etc., particularly in comparison, again, to somewhere like New Zealand. So actually, that is also a consideration in how evolved in your business are you to be able to support and satisfy those regulatory requirements.
How does the panel view, we have a listed broker from New York who kind of took a step back recently, I think it was in the couple of last years, and got an offshore entity formed. I mean, it should be going forward, you know, tier 3 to tier 1. How do we view an act like this?
That's actually not so unusual lately. And this is actually, it sort of goes against what we've been thinking. Is like you start off tier 3, go to tier 2, go to tier 1. Some guys have already got to tier 1 or even started there. And then they've been, even their regulatory body, wherever they are. And we actually saw this out of Cyprus recently. And again, you mentioned Japan, that the Japanese JFSA weren't overly happy with 100+ brokers out of Cyprus taking Japanese clients. And the Cypriot board actually announced that whoever CySEC license shouldn't be taking any clients outside of Europe. 2 months later, that was taken back. What happened was that over 100 brokers basically told CySEC, this is closing down our shop. You're basically cutting out half our business. And they went back. But it is, and that point, in that period, a lot of the brokers that already were regulated, MiFID regulated, were thinking, oh my God, what am I supposed to do with my Japanese clients, my Australian clients, my other clients? I'm going to start up a non-regulated body to take those clients. So then the European clients were going and being funneled into their MiFID company, and the non-European clients were going into the unregulated, or once again, tier 3, tier 2. And then once again, they basically just split the funneling of their clients. Now, besides that, nothing had changed. They possibly had a different company, they possibly had different payments being funneled into a different direction, possibly being from banking. But the call center, retention teams, trading platforms, all the same. Nothing has changed. And that was, and it's coming again because as regulation is getting tighter and more strict, and as was mentioned, that there is no such thing as a global regulator. You can't just get one regulation that covers the globe. It doesn't exist. Once you have different jurisdictions, I think this is going to be more and more common.
Can the regulator still catch you? You know, can the JFSA still be on your case if you're operating from the BVI?
In essence, yes, because every jurisdiction basically says if you want to take clients from me, we'll talk about Japan again, but it's true for every location, you must be JFSA. However, we all know that not all Japanese clients are acting with Japanese JFSA regulated companies. So what happens if they're actually going to an FSA company or a New Zealand FSB or a non-regulated BVI? What happens there? Can they have potential against you? In theory, yes. In practice, the main country that's actually doing that is the US. But besides the US, the rest of the world is, I would say, more threatening but not really acting.
Yeah, I think in my experience, ASIC sent it sends letters. It gets a complaint from someone who's using an offshore platform that's marketing to Australia. It'll send them a letter, and then it's up to that broker to show that they weren't actually marketing to Australia, because if someone in Australia finds a broker outside of Australia and creates an account then that broker hasn't actually breached any of their obligations.
But what about the company, you know, that has the FCA regulation, has the BVI company? Who takes the ownership? Does ASIC say, you know what, we're shutting you down because you're doing something here, bad behavior here?
It's actually two different companies. So they've got no recourse against the FCA company because the FCA company hasn't taken any. If they've actually opened up a second company, a non-regulated company, to take that Australian client, then that's their counterparty. If it's actually done under the FCA, then they can send a letter out. But apart from the US, it's usually with letters, emails. Europe is getting a little bit more strict as far as even internet sites are getting shut down as far as marketing. So if somebody's non-regulated in Europe and they've, I would say, gone over the radar, because you can be underneath the radar for quite some time. It means you're small, you haven't had any complaints against you. You know, you're there. They might not take notice, but once you start getting to a certain level, and that level is not really black and white, then the regulator in Europe, or it's actually particular bodies, might start limiting you as far as saying you cannot advertise here, you cannot advertise there, on local presence. So they limit your business, they send you letters, but it hasn't really gone beyond that as far as I know.
It's not really effective. What we're seeing in the binary option scenario is that a lot of companies are working from outside of Japan. For example, we're talking about Japan because Japan is a very lucrative jurisdiction and marketplace. They are receiving a lot of letters, warning letters. Sometimes they're being blacklisted, they're going on blogs, but they are not really hesitating. They're continuing to attack in Japan, and they don't have really an effective enforcement capabilities. The only one case we saw that was really pretty harsh on one binary option company was in the US. I believe that a lot of us, it's quite public, quite known. You don't mess with the SEC, so you don't just go there and you announce to the world that you have, you know, a lot of presence over there. But apart from that, it's pretty flexible. You know, with being binary option, you can really decide from a business perspective, for as long as it's beneficial for us, we will go with the regulation. If not, you create a different company offshore. And I keep saying offshore because with binary options, you can freely say it as of now. It is changing, but you know, we have more flexibility with binary options. So you can decide to work on a lower regulatory requirements, and you can be slightly higher. There's another point where the regulators have to understand really that at the end of the day, we represent businesses. We have P&L, you know, we have the books to show positive at the end of the year. Japan, if we take Forex, for example, they decided to deleverage quite significantly. They went from 1 to 100 to 1 to 25 right now, and businesses are really, I understand what is the reason. They wanted to consolidate the business, they wanted to get rid of, just to clean it out. But it creates a business challenge, you know, and you're asking yourself, why should I stay in Japan? What is in there for me, especially if you are a market maker? So we see a lot of companies going out, you know, they will still exist in Japan. They will open an ASIC in Australia to try and capture the flow and offer better terms for their clients because they are losing business as well.
So through this regulatory arbitrage, you have the shop front, which is, you know, all jazzy, and then the back door's open for anyone. I mean, how is that viewed, Paul? I mean, is ASIC or anyone saying, like, you know, this needs to be looked at, that you can't just have an ASIC license and then an offshore license to do all the nitty-gritty stuff?
Well, we're finding if a client complains and they're from somewhere outside Australia, then ASIC will still just bring it in to jurisdiction, even if the Australian licensee says, well, actually, the counterparty was in BVI or something. ASIC was fairly broad in the way they're interpreting that. And I think I was having a discussion earlier today with someone who was talking about this courts finding there's a duty of care that the platform has to these people and being quite generous in the way they interpret duty of care. And I think that's one way that courts have always found an equitable remedy when technically, legally, someone's outside jurisdiction, what someone in the court might think is equitable anyway. So, yeah, we're seeing, obviously, as a result of G20, there's a lot of attempts to reduce regulatory arbitrage. So with all the derivative trade reporting, with the NTA requirements all set around $1 million or thereabouts, there's a lot of attempts, I think, to minimise regulatory arbitrage. So I think New Zealand, for example, if you look at the consultation that they've put out to get a licence this year, from April Fool's Day, you can apply for a licence. And well, that's what they're planning. They might push that date back, but they've pretty much mirrored that against the Australian application process and then added in a whole other layer of detail. And so they're trying, I think all the regulators, particularly the IOSCO members, they're all trying to make things as similar as they can. But I think the discussion that we're having now is, it's evident that there's still plenty of jurisdictions that people can start in. It's worth mentioning also, you can start up from scratch in Australia with no capital. You just start as an introducer, you'd sit under someone's license, you'd pay them a monthly fee, you'd generate experience for 3 years, and you could do that at a relatively low cost. And if you're running a good business, you could then flick on the market maker part of your license if you can put up the $1 million of cash. So you can actually start from day one, tier one.
Go on, Mark.
I would say that this regulatory arbitrage, as you say, actually we've seen it all before, actually in this region 10 years ago, and it's grown out of where there is no regulation. So often where there is no regulation, an entity may set up that is not regulated to move into, to market, to explore the region. As the regulations grow and develop, then that company will seek to become regulated, typically Hong Kong, Singapore, etc. And again, that's happened over the last 10 years. I feel the reason we're seeing it again is markets such as West Africa now, where a lot of entities are actually being set up, BVIs, etc., just to target this region. Because why? They want to decouple the risk from their regulated entity and put it through effectively another entity in terms of the credit card potential, the fraudulent movements, and again, wait for the environment and the regulation to develop so that vehicle then can move into becoming a regulated entity within the required region.
Perfect. Before we move on, are there any questions from the audience or any statements, any comments people like to make? Yeah, Mike will come to you.
Hello, my name is Farhad. I am from company Forex4U. My question is about Asian regulator as Indonesian regulator who set up totally different requirements, such as the owner of a regulated company, FX company in Indonesia should be only citizen of Indonesia, which is closest to market for foreign companies.